Mine's Hey, TikTok. Here we go again. I'm gonna, against my better judgment, I'll try this TikTok one. I know everybody's saying I can get a stream key. I don't think I have anywhere near the number of followers. I think you're supposed to have 3,000 or something. I don't know why they got to make it so hard to stream from your PC. It's almost useless without being able to see my screen. You see my stupid face. That doesn't do you any good. I really wish you could see the screen and we could actually talk about what's actually going on here. My face has nothing to do with it. I know it's so important for the algo or whatever, but anyways, I'm gonna be starting this in a second. Let me get going to main mix. So this is evidence-based audio number 218. This is SafeSpace, the gift that keeps on giving. And before I get there, I'm just going to play a little something. Let me play this video first, and then I'll explain it after that. All right, I want to show, I don't know why the resolution is so bad. Line 6 Helix, HX edit, whatever, floor. The copy and paste is still broken. So let's look at these two snapshots right here. Here's rhythm, and I'm going to switch to snapshot 1. Look at the values here. So let's just look at the speed. That's 2.5 in both snapshots. Yeah, sorry you guys on TikTok, you can't see this, but okay, I'm going to reload this guy just to be sure. So I copy this chorus. I'm going to go to another preset. I'm going to paste this chorus in. Okay, and we hit save. Now, this is correct. Now it's gone dropped to 0. See that? This is wrong. This speed should have been 2.5. Why is it at 0? Okay, so basically, yeah, I'm sorry for you guys that can't see. This is the Line 6 Helix floor. It's a multi-effects processor. And from time to time, I have bugs with the editor software where it ends up putting the wrong values on some of the parameters. It seems to be only in things that are controlled by snapshots. And as usual, when you report a software problem, most of the people in the forums, or a lot of the people in the forums, are just going to gaslight you. They're going to tell you, oh, no, it's a problem between the keyboard and the chair, which honestly, it often is for things. But I tend to be a canary in the coal mine in that I end up getting bugs first. I don't know if I'm just unlucky, but usually when I find bugs, eventually other people will find them. But every single time it happens, you got to run this gauntlet of people basically gaslighting you in an actual proper use of that term. And it's so frustrating. My synthetic wig. Thank you. Yeah, it's a problem when somebody's having a bug with the software. Don't just automatically assume that they're wrong. It's a possible there's a bug, and it's one of the more frustrating ones because I have sent it out to be repro'd, but because the problem happens when you export it, and I can pull it up on a text file, you can see it if you really wanted to. The bug is already there, or the wrong parameter values are already there, so there's really nothing they can test. Luckily, in this case, I think there's actually an illegal value that's showing up on one of the parameters. It's the actual speed parameter from the chorus. A couple builds ago, I had the same problem with the one of the compressors, and eventually they always fix it. But it's just weird that you always have to run through this gauntlet of gaslighters before anybody takes it seriously. Luckily, I just send it straight to line 6. They usually take care of it. So anyways, that's the latest news on. If you really want to see it, go to Pipeline Audio YouTube channel, and it'll be line 6 Helix, copy and paste, still broken between presets. And there's a couple other videos from there. Let's see. Helix 3.6 still bugging out and changing parameters at random. Then another one called Helix 3.6 and HX edit 3.6, 3.61 preset copy bug. Another one called data saving corruption and errors still in Helix 3.61. So there's several of these, and then well, all the way back to when I first got the Helix, pretty much. Helix HX edit, major USB bugs with instant actions, and so I've documented lots of data corruption in the past. So, oh man, see, everybody says get on TikTok, but this is the kind of comments you get on TikTok, man. Unreal. All right. So let me get up to the main thing on here. And we've talked about this thread before. This is over at SafeSpace. The thread topic is called how important are preamps and analog to digital converters for the end product sound quality? And this guy, who is CX Gotti? Let me see. I'm going to invite you against my better judgment. Here you go. Hey, just getting on TikTok again and trying to figure this stuff out. But what? No. What is that? Oh man, I have no idea about that kind of stuff. I'm more just into audio myth busting. I don't know any battle stuff. I guess that's how you get more followers, though, right? I guess I should learn this stuff. Yeah, I don't think I got any supporters anyway, so it's okay. Yeah, I will. I'm still trying to figure this out. Well, yeah, thank you. That's awesome. That's the cool thing about TikTok is you can actually have people on. I watch Phil talk, Danny all the time, and he really does some cool stuff. Hey, Poo Ninja. Okay, so anyway, this thread is called "How Important Are Preamps and Analog to Digital Converters for the End Product Sound Quality?" And we've talked about this thread, but man, it keeps giving. So this is the original poster, Capo San, somebody in Berlin. He says, I'm slowly but surely upgrading my home studio after buying some analog synths. It's time to stop using my Soundcraft MTK12 as audio interface and buy something better. For example, U80 Apollo. A friend told me I should also buy a preamp like the U80 Solo 610 to have a proper high quality recording pipeline. That's a lot of money. Do you think it's worth the investment? In your experience, what are the major differences you can hear in the final product? For example, a mixed mastered track between a cheap audio interface and expensive audio interface powered with an expensive preamp. All right. So it almost sounds like his friend was just a guy who's just a marketing parrot. You read this crap in a magazine or at SafeSpace, and you can tell what month it is that something's been recommended by what ads are on the side of the SafeSpace screen. Obviously, this is a U80 Apollo, U80 Solo 610. So let's break this down. It's time to stop using my Soundcraft MTK12 as audio interface and buy something better. What's better? Okay, sadly, my website is down right now for some reason. I have to get that figured out. But I've actually tested all this stuff, and I've run sweeps through it. I've tested for distortion. I've tested for noise, bandwidth, frequency response, you name it. And for the most part, modern gear, even the cheapest junk, that you find on your interface. Let's say you've got a Focusrite Solo or Scarlett or whatever. It's very flat. It's amazingly hi-fi. Like, you know, again, I could have Ethan Weiner on again. We talk about what matters, you know, or if you want to record truth, if you want your recording to be accurate, what matters? The frequency response, the bandwidth. And again, if you get those two confused, bandwidth and frequency response, they're closely related, but bandwidth is the highest and lowest frequency the thing can capture, usually specified as within plus or minus 3 dB. Whereas frequency response is how flat is the level versus frequency within that passband. Then there's distortion, and there's noise. There's also time-based error and stuff, but in phase issues if that is applicable. But for the most part, you're talking about noise, distortion, frequency response, and bandwidth. Okay, so that's really what you're looking at. So when you're talking about a Soundcraft MTK12 as audio interface and buy something better, what's wrong with it? First of all, you have to establish that there's actually something wrong with that. I'm going to say that there's not really something better. And you can look around my room. I'm not going to grab the phone and turn it around. I've got a Neve AMEC 9098 in here. I got Apogee Rosettas. I got whatever mic preamp you think that you're supposed to have according to all these marketing weasels. And they don't test any better than a decent modern mic preamp. These Focusrite Octopre's that I use, they're great. They're pretty damn flat. So he says, for example, U80 Apollo. What makes the Apollo better? Is it got more frequency response? Has it got a wider bandwidth or flatter frequency response? Does it have a wider bandwidth? Does it have less noise? Does it have lower distortion? It might have negligibly that much, but remember, just because something, even if it can test better, doesn't mean that it reaches the threshold of audibility. Let's say you have a device that can record 32 bits versus 24 bits. Everything else being equal, even the 24-bit converter can't capture 24 bits of resolution. The real world doesn't work that way. There's thermal noise. There's like environmental noise and stuff. You're never going to get past like 21 bits. Maybe in an anechoic chamber, you might get 21. I don't know. But the 32 bits is not going to help. So even though it might test slightly better, less quantization error, for instance, it's not at a level that you can actually hear it. There is a stacking claim. Sometimes it's a stacking myth. Sometimes there's actually truth to it. But it really doesn't matter here. And so you don't need to go get something better. The U80 Apollo is not better. And I would say, well, I mean, it could have less noise, possibly. I doubt it. Not by much. Not by any amount that would matter. I think the Soundcraft MTK12 is probably going to be decent. Let's take a look at this. Soundcraft MTK12. And remember, when it comes to audio interfaces, what matters is the drivers, right? As long as it's something competent. So here's the MTK12. Let's see what this does. I mean, if it's only 2 in, 2 out, then sure. Like maybe you need something bigger. Channels. See, USB interface. Oh, 2 in, 2 out. Oh, whoa. No, 14 in, 12 out on the MTK? No. Okay, so that's a decent multi-channel interface. I bet it's okay. We just watched that video with Barry Johns where he's saying that there's some kind of compromise made, but he didn't provide any evidence or any numbers. Boy, I really got to get my website back up. So anyway, I don't think it's going to be any better. And when you're talking about UAD, I know I'm going to get nailed for this, but because of the way their software works, I would say you're probably worse. The Soundcraft MTK almost certainly uses Thesicon drivers. Let's see. Let's see if they give us a list. It's almost surely going to use these drivers right here. Same as pretty much every other USB interface out there. And you're not really going to get that much better unless you go RME. Okay, so anyway. Also, a friend told me I should buy a preamp like the U80 Solo 610. to have a proper high quality recording pipeline. UAD Solo 610, whatever it costs. How much is that thing? UAD Solo 610 is, here we go, it's Sweetwater. Oh, it's only $1,200 for this mic preamp that isn't going to test any better than the mic preamp that you already have on your interface, almost guaranteed. So you asked, do you think it's worth the investment? I say no. In your experience, what are the major differences you can hear in the final product? So you know what doctors say, right? Any serious epidemiologist or infectious disease studier, practitioner, whatever, they're going to say that the 3 scariest words in medicine are "in my experience," right? Because we have all kinds of biases that we need to correct for. And this is definitely one of them. Again, watch a video on the McGurk effect. You cannot trust your ears. I know people say, well, I'm in business because I have good ears. It's true, but at the same time, you cannot trust your ears to make objective judgments between 2 audio sources. I mean, it's very difficult, and you really have to properly blind for that and everything else, because of things like the McGurk effect, where if you haven't seen it before, if you say ba, 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 even if it's the same sound coming out, if you move your lips like an F, people are going to hear fa, 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 even though the sound is exactly the same. It's there's so many ways to fool your ears, so we really got to be careful with that kind of thing. Okay, so he's asking if you can hear any major differences in the final product. For example, a mixed master track between cheap audio interface and expensive audio interface powers an expensive preamp. No, there aren't going to be any differences. I'm sorry. Not technically, but however, of course, there's the placebo effect. If you feel better about the gear that you're using, you might record better tracks. You might play better. You might be happier. It's just like me. I push ergonomics so hard. Technically, it's not going to sound any better when, if it's easier to just jump in there and start recording. But I'll tell you what, I'll record a hell of a lot more because it's not a pain and everybody's happier. So it will end up possibly sounding better, but technically it doesn't. Again, there's also the, this you get what you pay for, which is garbage. When we did the DI box test, the cheapest DI box in the list, which is one of these Rapco Horizon, whatever, DB1s, passive direct box, tested as good as the very best radial DI box. And, you know, I got piles of these radials here. Well, I guess I can't pull it out because it's plugged into everything. So, you know, people like to say, I just talk about, you know, testing things because I can't afford anything. Here's a radial JDI right here. This is the top of the line radial. I've got 7 radial devices here. It's not about the sound. Actually, they are shielded pretty good, but it's mostly about the fact that you could drive over them and they still work. That's what I really like. But again, this Rapco is actually pretty good. Back in the day when that thing was made, it was $20. And so, yeah, you get what you pay for. It's garbage. So let me get to where I start talking. And I've actually put a lot of people on ignore, so I'm going to have to, let me see if I can fix this. So it's going to take me a second here. I'm sadly going to have to unignore people in order to really show this post. How do I get to my, let me see if I can go to my ignore list. Ignored threads. User tagging. Oh, edit ignore list. Okay, let me take some people off my ignored list. Okay. So it's a very long thread, so it's going to take me a little bit to get to the relevant points. We've talked about most of these for a while back. So, you know, My standard one is just ask for evidence, right? So deleted 6894F said preamps and converters can bring your recordings to the next level depending on how you use them. And so I asked for evidence. What does that mean? I mean, yes, we keep Avalon 737 mic preamps around because a lot of rappers psychologically need to see that in order to believe that you're capable of recording them. It's actually not so great of a device, in my opinion. It takes up a lot of space and costs a lot of money and doesn't actually do anything better than anything else. But it makes them feel better. And so you might have to have those around. So yeah, that could take it to the next level that way, but technically they're not gonna. So somebody else asks, how clean do you want the glass when you look out the window? There's this idea that these more expensive mic preamps are cleaner, give you a better picture. But as we've shown, even some of these cheapest mic preamps out there, and I'm talking even Behringer, are miles above what we used to have back in the studio back in the day. They might not have as much headroom, but that kind of doesn't matter. So you ask dirty glass might not seem dirty until you clean it and then afterwards appreciate the newfound visual clarity. These are all good claims, but when you make this claim, you've got to provide evidence. You have to show that this thing has more fidelity than the thing you're comparing it to. It says clean preamps, converters are like clean glass. It matters. That's your claim. You got to bring some evidence. There are, roughly speaking, 3 levels: budget level, Scarlett, Behringer, etc., competitive mid-range, Apogee Duet, Apogee Apollo, or UAD Apollo, etc., exotic, expensive, Prism, Burl, etc. All right. This is just marketing weasel parroting. You're just repeating the same crap that you see on the right-hand side where the ads are on SafeSpace. And, I mean, you can see it. It's calling it 3 levels, Scarlett or Behringer. Hey, the Scarlett tests fine. I've tested this stuff. We've made extensive threads about actually testing this gear. And so have a lot of other people. Competitive mid-range, Apogee Duet. Do you remember the disaster that is every single time Apogee tries to make an interface? Get out of here. That they don't even belong in the budget category. UAD Apollo, again, the disaster of Universal Audio software. I don't even think they belong in the budget level, but they cost more than anybody else for them. Well, actually, there's Antelope, which is another thing we talk about all the time on this channel, right? Exotic, expensive, Prism, Burl, whatever. I mean, again, bring the evidence. So I had to say, for those of us who actually test this stuff, the budget level mic pre's are insanely flat and would most certainly be the clean window in this analogy. Perhaps you want a dirty window and would spend for that if some of these mic preamps are meant to distort the sound. Hint, when you actually measure, most any decent pre is about ruler flat. Aside from that, some put a little bit of treble boost in, which can easily be added by a plug-in EQ later. And again, so when we tested the AMEC 9098, what did we find? A big spike in the high end. I think it was around 8K or 12K. So that's kind of cheating. But does that always sound better? No, that could have made hiss or noise. And I say, it's crazy how often people parrot claims but never put any data in. Again, you're going to make these claims, bring some evidence. All right. Poo Ninja asks, how often should one clean their tweets? Dust buildup adds weight, hence slowing, changing the response capability. How clean do you need your windows? You know what? I've never cleaned my tweeters. I guess I'm screwed. There's some really good posters in here. So like Sage 691. To my ears, the second biggest scam ever was that converter quality was some kind of game changer in the phase of capturing source tracks. Even a lowly Digi 888 16-bit converter is perfectly capable of capturing quality source tracks worthy of being sent to the turd polishers. Yes. But then again, he says the number one scam was that hardware emulation plugins have advanced so much in the last 20 years that they're as good as the real thing. You can say that, but I bet you if we did an ABX test, you might be surprised. All right, so this goes on for quite a while. I'm just gonna nail where my particular posts are. So someone else says, I believe there is some overly optimistic people in here who believe that when they record with an El Cheapo preamp and then use an SSL plugin, they will get the same results as having a real SSL desk. It would be really nice if that were true. So I ask, what do you think the difference would be aside from the plugin having better specs in every way measurable? Again, you're going to make a claim, you better bring some evidence. And so, let's see. Dee yeah, says, I don't know about this poster, but introducing noise, distortion, clipping, input stages of preamps and or converters, misalignment on purpose has become a thing lately and often gets praised specifically by those who haven't ever had a chance to work on the old dinosaurs. I wouldn't even say ever had a chance to work on the old dinosaurs. I would say we're ever cursed with having to work on the old dinosaurs. The second I was able to unchain myself from those old crap-ass consoles, I'm talking Neves, SSLs, Tridents. Remember, I used to work at Vintage. We used all this stuff. We get away from the damn Studer 800 and 827s and all these unreliable things you got to keep a shoe chained to the console to whack them with. The second I got away with it, great. You guys have this nostalgia for something that never existed. We didn't want distorted consoles. We didn't want broken anything. We were trying to achieve fidelity back then. All right, so... And then they talk a little bit about, you know, clock claims and things like that. Sorry, so this actually goes on for quite a while. I'm just going to go through the threads. It's going to take me a bit. Okay, so the guy asked, what do you think the difference would be aside from a plugin having better specs in every way measurable? He says, first of all, just to put the pic of the clone gear in the plugin background won't be enough to emulate its sound, and unfortunately, most of the emulations only do this. That's not true at all. And let me see if I responded to this. Okay, so here we go. So he says, first of all, to just put the pic of the clone gear in the plugin background won't be enough to emulate its sound. And so I say, who claimed that a picture would emulate a sound? That's a total straw man. Yeah. So Poo Ninja's asking, I never understood why Line 6 had a hum control to amp sims to add hum. I guess because they want it real, you know. So it also has ripple. What else? Yeah. So there's ripple, there's hum, there's sag, which actually acts as compression. So I guess that's good. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I really wish they would have spent more of their time on making sure that the HX edit wouldn't bug out on me every couple updates, but. Yeah, you know, who wants the hum? But I guess maybe it's like phones where they put the comfort noise in so you don't think somebody hung up on you. All right, so then next, recycle claims. Unfortunately, most of the emulations only do this, aesthetic emulation. And so I said, I'm sure you have some screen caps from Plugin Doctor or an oscilloscope to prove this claim, right? Of course not. Of course not. You're going to make claims, you're not going to back it up. And it's not true that they only do aesthetic emulation. They actually, there's people who physically component model stuff. I mean, when you do an ABX test and you can't tell the difference, that's the end of the game. And so here's where we get into religion and Deepak Chopra, whatever crap. He says, said that, yes, there are some plugins with good engineering. Obviously, they don't get to capture the true soul of the cloned gear, but you can be moderately satisfied from the result. Oh, moderately, huh? And so I said, what units are you measuring soul in? Of course, full of crap. So he also says, in this case, the weak link in the chain becomes the audio interface. No. When it is not very accurate, low budget models, which isn't true. Again, we've tested this stuff. That's not true at all. It will not be able to provide the plugin with the original signal in all its glory. It's going to provide the plugin with the crappiest interface you could buy right now that has an ASIO driver. The worst one of all is going to have way better specs than the very best tape recorder of the vintage era that you idiots are pretending that you want to emulate. Any modern interface will blow the crap out of the specs of a Studer 827. So I say, I'm sure you've got some oscilloscope shots to show this to contradict those who have actually measured these things and can easily show that in most parameters that matter, even the lowliest Behringer interface absolutely smacks the crap out of the best 2-inch machine ever made, right? Of course not. Of course they're not going to have any evidence. And so he also said, I've never heard of a preamp emulation that sounded better than the original gear. And so I ask, I'm sure you have the measurements to prove that, right? And of course we know there's not going to be any measurements. And so I'm responding to somebody else who claims it's usually things like headroom. And so I say, again, if you understand headroom, there is no analog circuit anywhere in any universe that can compete with 64-bit float for headroom. And that's true. There's only so much you can go between noise floor and distortion in any analog circuit. Even a cable. Believe it or not, you're okay. If you don't believe me, take a guitar cable and plug it between your amplifier and your speaker, and see how loud you can go before that cable fries. Okay, so yeah, there is no analog circuit anywhere in any universe that can compete with 64-bit float for headroom. If you mean the lack of headroom, that can and has been simulated accurately. And so he goes on to claim clarity. And I said, there is no analog circuit in any universe that can claim the fidelity of a digital recording. If you mean the lack of clarity, that can and is simulated just fine by digital signal processing. And then he says, and punch. See, they always use weasel words. They never use units, measurements with units that you can actually compare. And so I ask, what units are you measuring punch in? And Joe Q, of course, he was always hilarious when it comes to these jihadists, basically. He says, you measure punch in microtysons. And your typical interface preamp is about 3.4 microtysons, and API is closer to 4.2 microtysons. And it's obviously Mike Tyson for the punch, right? Okay. And so deleted keeps going. But it doesn't have anything to do with the analog world where human beings actually exist. And I say, yes, it does. That lack of noise and distortion and lack of frequency response error and bandwidth loss is fed to the digital analog converter and likely leading to fewer converter hits than if you used analog gear. He says, even if everything you create is in the box, at some point it is DA converted and interacts with the transducer. And so I say, and it still had more headroom before the final conversion than any analog gear ever made or possible to make. If you want to talk about headroom, digital absolutely annihilates 90 dB at 1 qubit. Okay. Yeah, I love watching the historians argue about what a qubit was. They're trying to make Noah's Ark big enough to fit every animal in the world, so they have to keep changing the definition of qubit. So again, he says, you want a ton of analog headroom at this stage, and you will be able to hear whatever you have achieved, whatever it is you're trying to achieve, and here you want clarity free from distortions, phasing issues, etc. And I say this has no coherence to the claims you make, because what does that even mean? He says, in terms of punch, I hear it across many systems. I measure RMS, LUFS, and SPL. I have my system so I can see, then hear, and feel the punch. Speakers deliver the end results. I test my mixes across many systems to test. I guess, again, let's stop being dishonest. Let's stop using weasel words. Let's talk about things that we can actually measure. So I said, again, what units are you measuring punch in? These are just weasel words like warm, forward, and euphonic. Just Deepak, Oprah, Chopra, Sylvia Brown word salad. And that's all it is. If you can't give a real answer, you'd go Deepak Chopra on everybody. And then, now we get crazy. You will see an anti-measurement religion, scripture, I don't know. People who don't believe in measurements. I mean, look, if you got to replace a door, like what is it Peter Boghossian says, if your door's all termite eaten and stuff, you got to get a new door, you're going to have to measure the old door so you can put the right door in, right? And there's different ways to get that measurement. You could use a tape measure, or you could ask a dog. One of those is a much more reliable pathway to truth. Asking your dog is probably not going to do you any good. So he says, none of this silly measurements you keep going on about matters. I said, okay, a math denier, that's okay, I'm out. And I think that's when I put this guy on ignore. But for some reason, SafeSpace's ignore thing didn't work, so it keeps coming back on me. Let me see. More Joe Q just frying these guys. This can be a long one. Sorry, there's a lot to this thread, and it just keeps giving. Okay, let's see. Okay, so 95 Throwback asks, and this is where you start getting into this really, I guess, there's a lot of hipsters buying vinyl. What they find out that like 99% of them were never taken out of their package. But 95 Throwback asks, do you not like older mixes because of all the distortion? Are you just really into the 70s, 80s push for cleanliness before intentional saturation started to become common in the 90s? There's really only that one era of the 70s, 80s where super clean recordings were a part of mainstream music, and even then they were usually built on a fair amount of subtle saturation. So I said, speaking with both artists and engineers during my learning years involved in some of the most iconic songs from the era, some were nearly driven to tears over the distortion and noise walls they hit and wanted to do so much more that they couldn't because of these limitations. But of course, a bunch of people on the forums know better than the artists, producers, and engineers of the actual songs in question that they actually wanted distortion and noise and massively limited dynamic range and bandwidth and whacked frequency response. So, from my past, believe it or not, and I didn't even know this guy was still alive at this point, but when I was learning recording, we got a phone call, and on the other end was Ben E. King. This is the guy who did, I think, Stand By Me and some of the other stuff. And I didn't believe it was him, for one thing. But, one of our clients was doing a cover, or actually had samples from Stand By Me or one of those Benny King songs. Was it Under the Boardwalk, maybe? So he had called to discuss. I guess what they were saying is that Benny King would personally want to know about every cover that was using his stuff, which is kind of interesting. And I finally got to talking about, what it was like while we're waiting on hold. He actually called back a couple times, and they talk about how frustrating it was dealing with the limitations back then. It wasn't something that helped them, that they wanted. And these guys pretending 50 years later that that's what they were really after, they weren't. Okay, so I also said I'll take something desirable existing as better than something not existing. But that wasn't the claim you guys are making. They didn't want noisy, distorted records. The artists back in the day, for the most part, unless they were actually after noise, they didn't want noisy, distorted records. They wanted clear. They wanted to present what they were playing. I know as guitar players, we distort amplifiers on purpose. There are times when people want to do that, but that's not what these guys are trying to do when they're capturing. And back in the day, before microphone preamp makers, in my opinion, got a little bit dishonest, if you read their earlier interviews and stuff, like back in the 70s, they would always talk about this is the cleanest, most faithful circuit that we could make when they're talking about the mic preamps and their consoles and stuff. They weren't trying to change anything. They're trying to be a straight wire with gain. All right, so let me go on here. Man, we got a lot of pages to get to. I'm sorry. You don't have to stick around because this is going to be painful, I'm sure. On page 7 of 26. Woo! All right. Okay, so Rob28 claims analog signals have infinite variability. I got to tell you, you guys who understand, actually, I don't understand quantum mechanics, but I've read enough, I hope. Analog signals don't have infinite variability. So I say, no, they don't. The universe is quantized. That's the whole point of quantum mechanics, right? There only exists, you can be here or here. You can't be in between. The universe is quantized, and analog recording mediums can't even reach the variability of a digital recording signal, especially when it comes to dynamic range. Not only is analog not infinite, analog can't come close to the individual values that digital can. So, and I asked this because, and now I'm having trouble finding this old video, but I'm asking, anyone getting flashbacks to that speech where Rupert Neve mentioned digital audio and was talking about being analogous to light switches? There's this, I think it was Texas, some shop in Texas. Rupert Neve was at, I think, he died during the pandemic, right? He was talking about digital having noise or distortion or something because it's like light switches being clicked on and off. I mean, it was kind of sad, but he's Neve. Oh, so, you know, Rob28 was explaining that he's, the sarcasm was apparently lost on you. That's okay. Some people actually still believe digital stair steps. But I think he was backing up my point, you know, about the analog being infinite. If you guys just type in Monty digital audio, you'll see about the stair step and lollipop myths. Hopefully that can clear some stuff up. Okay. So Rob's bigging up, you know, I talked about because, you know, I didn't see his sarcasm because of Poe's law, right? Like, Poe's law, audio believers are often so deranged in things they say it's impossible to distinguish from parody, right? That's Poe's law. Usually they meant for religious fundamentalism, but it's no different in the audio world. Or guitar tone wood believers. Yep. That's right. Send your hate mail too. So Rob says, and yet the mystery lives on. The notion that analog waveforms have infinite points, like trying to locate a cork, and so it enters the realm of the mystical. My favorite is, science doesn't know everything yet. Like audio is on a par with the physics of black holes. Sheesh. Yep. And that's another thing, right? That's the argument from ignorance. Okay. So Timish asks, if things can simply wink in and out of existence, why can't sound have infinite points? And I say, and this is my understanding, man, this is way beyond my pay grade. But I say, because there aren't infinite pockets to fill with those points. It's either in one pocket or another, nothing in between. And I don't think between is really the right way to look at it, but man, I just don't know. I'm not that good at quantum mechanics. But I know analog audio isn't infinite, and neither is the universe. And that's why you get this like oh my God, do we want to talk about this simulation theory? It's because of the quantum nature of things. So Jim Electric says, I've always thought my Army Fireface 800 was great, and then I got a Prism Sound Orpheus, and the difference in sound quality of recordings and playback blew me away. Again, you know, make a claim, bring some evidence. So I said, what measurable differences did you find? Didn't hear anything. So he also said, plugged one in, then unplugged it and plugged the other in. All right. You guys know, if you've ever tested human hearing or read anything about human hearing, we have garbage memory of one sound to the next. Absolutely garbage. This is why the ABX test exists. So you're choosing between, you're comparing two things, signal A and B, but you don't know which one is which. So it plays X. X could be A or B. And then you go and see statistically what the results were. How many did you get right? Or could you perceive a difference? Whatever. Plugging in one, then unplugging is exactly the wrong way of doing things, because it really pulls up the weaknesses in human biology, psychology, neurology, physiology. So I said, this is exactly how you get the wrong results. We are an error generating machine. This is exactly why the scientific method was advised. So again, here comes the eternal religious gaslight, right? So he says, didn't need to evaluate them that hard, though. The difference is obvious. And so I say, otherwise known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. Again, exactly why the scientific method was devised. If it's that obvious, you can measure it and you can show it. Why haven't they? Garbage memory for color, sound, and what actually happened. So he says, I do live electronic jams and record them and always found the Fireface recordings took something away. The Orpheus took nothing away. Again, if you make a claim like that, it is so easy to measure it if it exists and show what the difference is. So I said, so it should be very easy to test these and show with the known parameters of audio to show the difference between these two in commonly measurable units that we all agree on. But of course they're not gonna. Spoiler alert. As in every other thread in the universe that shows this stuff, they'll never put up. So he says, so much more depth and clarity with the Orpheus. And so again, I got to ask, what units are you measuring depth and clarity in? And so he says, I don't want to get into any nerd weeds, but yeah. So I say, otherwise known as poisoning the well. Meanwhile, in the reality-based community, we do back up our claims with actual data, which is what these guys aren't ever going to do. Let's see. So that is page. Okay, we're moving along. It gets ugly, and there's a bunch of stuff that I just skipped because people are being dishonest. And there we go. So the guy who was challenged after making all these claims, you know, if they can't win with data because they're never going to post any, they're gonna go straight for emotion, right? So he says, wow, lol, forget I said anything. Buy an Orpheus or Titan or Lyra and try it yourself alongside an old Fireface 800. Isn't this like one of those supplement scams? Hey, you know, if you grind up a tiger and eat it, you're going to feel younger for longer. You know, you got to bring some evidence. I did many tests at the time, but I didn't intend to write an essay about it here. You did many tests, huh? But you won't show a single one, right? I so believe you. So he says, so I always answer with this one, AKA, I have this super hot girlfriend, but you live in Canada. You wouldn't know her. That's the claim they always make, right? My friend records albums and he totally says that, you know, this one's better. Which friend is that? Oh, he lives in another state, man. So I say, you claim a very well-made product with the top drivers in the business is inferior using nebulous, dimensionless weasel words, then run away when asked to back it up. I don't mean to single you out because so many of the faith-based true believers spout the same stuff constantly and never back it up. And then when actual tests are done, they end up picking the Mackie and Art preamps. It's all a joke. And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about there, probably the most famous one is the sound on sound test where they pulled up all these bajillion-dollar mic preamps and all these golden ears experts that claim to be able to hear all this difference. It's like these wine taster scammers. And they couldn't tell crap. They ended up statistically picking the two mic preamps they hated the worst, the Art and the Mackie. Like everybody talks crap about Mackie, right? And then they end up picking that one as the best one. So these guys are full of crap. Let's see. So somebody else, Preston135 says, if you have 3 people execute one, then the remaining 2 will have the exact same chance of one of them being executed next. That's half. Yet maths and computer science will say otherwise. What? Why? Then as a complete opposite, glass is half full if you're filling it. Knowing what comes before and after and present is where computers and math struggle and make wrong assumptions and common sense prevails. All right, none of that means anything. So I just said Deepak Chopra has entered the chat. Nat8808 says the following offering, follow-up after offering the test to forum readers. He's talking about the sound on sound test and all the excuses they made after the fact. If you guys remember James Randi, one of the greatest skeptics who ever lived, he did a dowsing test in Australia. And of course the dowsers couldn't back up their claims. They couldn't find anything with their dowsing. And they were all kind of like, wow, I guess I got to reevaluate myself, which was pretty honest. But then a couple days later, they call them up and give them all kinds of excuses why the dowsing didn't work. And so I say it's hilarious how close this is to the excuses the dowsers in Australia had after James Randi tested them, because that's really what happened at that preamp test. The post-mortem was a bunch of people, all kinds of claiming why their magical, mystical ears didn't actually work. Okay. Let's see, we're on to page 12. Let's see where we are. Okay, so I say I'm probably responding to a whole bunch of threads at once. It's one thing to have an opinion on two different sounds. It's a totally different thing to claim one product is better than another before even establishing that they do, in fact, sound different. Again, you've got to show that there's actually a difference before you start speculating on what that difference is and making all kinds of claims. This is the step and the fallacious this is the fallacious step that so many of the faith-based commit. It's one thing to even show that you can measure differences between two things. Remember, you got to reach the threshold of audibility. It's a whole nother level and must be shown to avoid dishonesty or falsehoods to show that difference reaches the threshold of audibility. And yes, I'm including the stacking hypothesis because, again, sometimes it's a myth, sometimes it's actually can be true. When you do neither of these and then use confirmation bias, Texas sharpshooter, argument from ignorance, or other fallacious reasoning to denigrate a perfectly good piece of gear or technique, you are doing harm. Especially when that comes in the form of telling someone that they need to buy a $5,000 mic preamp that you, true believers, can't even ABX apart from a Mackie. And that's really where I get into this. And for you guys who don't know my past so much, I was raised in the religion of pro audio where I believe that you did. Back in the day, you had to buy $5,000 mic preamps in order for it to even work. If you didn't use one of these $5,000 mic preamps, the recording was garbage. And this is still what a very large part, maybe most of the industry believes. It's a religion that is just impossible to shake free of pro audio. And these kind of shows are my penance because it's just nonsense. And the saddest part was, back in the day, I had a tech room. I could test all this stuff for myself. And I still believed it because that's what my deacons told me. And I kick myself every day for believing this crap. Arrogant ignorance is expanding exponentially. Yeah, there was a video, I think yesterday or the day before, with Pine Creek Doug and this guy, Kenny, where the arrogance to just keep digging in was just insane, and the lack of self-reflection. All right, so next. So 95 Throwback says there's going to be a pretty big difference between any $5,000 channel strip and a Mackie channel strip when used to their fullest. Again, that's a claim. And so I say, there you go again with the bald assertions. You're going to make a claim like that, you've got to back it up. And of course, they're not going to back it up. Never going to back it up. Let's see. So we're finally moving on here. Yay. Okay. So I say, next up, true believers defend the flat earth and then Tonewood and electric guitars. Man, I love to take digs at the Tonewood people. Deleted says, oh, if I only had the skill, I could make that Elisa's 3630 sound like a Fairchild. And so I said, World War I trenching teams will need to be called in to fix the drag marks on that soccer field created by the goalposts being moved so fast and so far. Again, this is a complete straw man, right? The Fairchild has like a variable time circuit. The 3630 is a fixed value attack and release. It's a totally different type of circuit. I'm not making that claim. But that's what they got to resort to because they won't put up any evidence. They just got to resort to, insults and straw men. Okay. Okay, so I say the logical fallacies in this thread are a gold mine. We'll definitely immortalize it in my next critical thinking section for our students. Yep, can't help it. Sorry. We're moving. We're moving. I'm sorry. This is a long one. All right. What happens, a lot of times people try and argue points that are way far down the road. I try and get back to the beginning because, if you let somebody start with a bad foundation, they can start building crap all over it. And if you're knocking away the stuff at the end, better yet to dig that thing out by its roots. She says, I can't answer that right now. Sorry. I think you guys are giving way too much away to the pixie dust creators. So many posts are taking it for granted that there even are audible differences in all cases. And that's what I'm saying. Is you guys, you better prove this stuff is different in the first place. I have to send a message real quick. Just because you can measure a difference doesn't mean it rises the threshold of audibility. Again, we're going over this again. Even given that, how many times have the true believers been asked for measurements that show their claims and they respond to the effect of, who needs measurements? My totally fallible ears connected to my error-generating wetware machine are all I need. So first show there's a difference, then show that you can hear the difference, then argue what better means. Okay? So deleted says, there are audible differences between converter designs. Apogee sounds very different from benchmark, from RME, from SSL. And so I say, good. Then it's easy to show it on a scope. My own tests show less than a plus or minus 1 dB frequency deviation between Apogee Rosetta and Behringer ADA 8000. Nearly 6 decibels less noise on the Rosetta. No nonlinear distortion differences that reach above minus 80 dB. Who is this guy? I don't know who you are. Sorry, Raja. You want to talk about audio? Say something in the chat. I have no idea what this is about. But let's just keep making claims without backing them up. Let's stop dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge. How much frequency response deviation is there between an SSL converter and Apogee? Use real numbers in units. They're not gonna. How much bandwidth deviation is there between an SSL converter and an Apogee? Use real numbers and units. How much noise difference is there between an SSL converter and an Apogee? Use real numbers and units. How much distortion deviation is there between an SSL converter and an Apogee? Use real numbers and units. After that, show that these can even reach the threshold of audibility. If you refuse any of these, we can all safely put you on ignore as an anti-science troll just spouting crap, likely to justify the sunk cost fallacy or being suckered by appeal to popularity. For sure, it's an argument from ignorance. And in this case, I provide a graph here. And while these curves might look a lot different, look at the scale on the side. This is 1 decibel. So the worst one of all, the one that everybody likes the best out of all these usually, the Midas mic preamps, have I think a 1 decibel dip at 20 kilohertz, but in all of the audible range, it's within like 0.3 decibels or 0.4 decibels. I mean, if you're going to say that 16K is audible or whatever, these things are like ruler flat. And one of the best ones, you look at the Octopre, Focusrite Octopre, and it is flat. It's flatter than the Apogee. Apogee has a little bit more roll off near the highs. There's some weirdness with some of these, but they're all super flat. Like with less than, for almost the entire range, it's less than 0.1 of a decibel, 1/10 of a decibel. And these guys are going to claim that they're so different. They make all these claims, they won't back up crap. But here's the real measurements right here. Here's the truth. You guys can lie about it all you want. And I'm sure they do. So let's go on to where they lie about this. So deleted says, these are all different from each other above 5K and below 80 hertz. Just looking at these graphs, if everything you record is being affected by the AD above 5K to even a fraction of a dB, that's going to alter things. No, it's not. So I said, how much? Okay, and this is where it really gets to, because this is where you got to put them, and they'll always run away. Challenge them with real money. Put some real money on the line. So I said, how much are you actually willing to bet that you can hear this less than 1 dB of difference at 18 kilohertz in a properly blinded ABX test at greater than 33% correct? I'll put $500 on you not being able to. Let's go. Put your money where your claims are. And they'll always run away from this. Somebody else says, who am I to say she's wrong? I say nobody. As the science has shown, the whole sommelier religion is nonsense. That's the wine tasters. With many of the top paid taste buds in the world unable to even tell the difference between white and red wine. And I just linked to a Guardian article where they actually test these wine taster claimants. So when I had asked the guy, how much are you willing to bet whether or not you can actually hear this? So he says, probably 0. But that's been the point that supposedly everyone knows and agrees on. These isolated double-blind tests don't necessarily say much. Yeah, right. Science says they can't be extrapolated to any systematic conclusion. So many lies. This is like a Gish Gallop, right? So I say, ladies and gentlemen, I present you Patches O'Houlihan. I tried every honest way I could. Now he's going on ignore. Anyone interested in honesty or sanity, I suggest you do the same. Yeah, I don't think I can hear 18 kilohertz either. So yeah, they run away. Let's find the next one. Yeah, somebody's backing me up that tiny little difference is not going to mean anything. Scope. Oh man, we're moving along here. Okay, page 16. All right, so again, deleted says these EQ graphs are all very different. I said, no, they aren't. It's less than a dB. It's less than a dB, you lying. Funniest part being, of all the ones in the list, the ones the believers often claim the best, Midas has the most deviation. So he says, thank you for partially proving my point to yourself using visuals meant for seeing rather than hearing audio. Pictures are not sound. So I say cars are not bananas, but graphs can describe reality. He said, sound is more than numbers because people are organic tissues, not numbers. What the hell does that mean? So I said, okay, Deepak Chopra. So he says, models of reality are not reality. Science has accepted this for a long time. And I say, who said models are reality? This is not a model. It's a measurement. And what is it a measurement of? Reality. Sorry. He says, I appreciate graphs, but EQ graphs do not capture the tone or performance or headroom or noise or phasing or crosstalk or dirty pots or failing summing amps, etc. It's a single snapshot in a theoretical space with a single voltage and frequency. So I say straw man and goalpost shifting. This is a graph of the frequency response. That's all it is. Remember, this guy claimed that these things had different frequency responses. They don't. So I say, however, if the frequency differences were anywhere near what anyone here was claiming, it would show up on the graph. And that's the truth. You guys are full of crap. So he says, even the specs listed with these devices are not real use conditions durability. And I said, yes, it is. These are analog to digital converters being used to convert analog to digital. That's the claim you made, man. That's the problem. Like James Randi used to do. He would set up the test they asked for, and they would still get it wrong. So he says, I really do pay attention to specs like headroom, but for me, it's how the device performs for me in use. Again, those are all measurable. No matter what a picture says at some given moment, I want gear that doesn't crap out in use. That's a totally different claim. So I say, way to shift those goalposts. This claim was about sound quality. Check the title. He says, these graphs don't capture the tone at all or the performance of the system. And I say, it captures the frequency response. If you think there is a different parameter that is all important, go ahead and show it. Again, they're not going to show crap. So he says, these graphs clearly show bumps and roll-offs that are really about 5 to 10%, which is that last bit so many cry for. Why, oh, why? I say, what? How the hell is less than 1 dB 5 to 10% of 144 decibels? This is the kind of thing that tells people you can't possibly be taken seriously. Okay, is there a mathematician out there? Is 1 out of 144 5 to 10%? I don't think so. I think it's less than 1%. I'm not a mathematician, whatever. Mathematician, whatever. But I'm pretty sure that 1 decibel out of 144 decibels is not 5 to 10%, especially since decibels are linear or log, right? So he says, I've used Apogee X series for a long time in SSL and RME and others. They all have a different sound. So I say, so you claim, but will refuse to show. Spoiler alert, again, they never show it. So he says, I don't need a silly little graph to see this. I can listen to recordings and hear it. Audio is about hearing, not seeing. I said, this is the entire reason the scientific method was codified. Humans are error-generating machines. Science tests perceptions against reality. The McGurk effect, again, the McGurk effect shows just how idiotic this quote is. Page. So Miscreant Records says, this wild, quickly checking out a few articles on Psychology Today, National Institute of Health, etc. Perception is everything or suggestion is everything. And I said, and this is a good one. Brian Brushwood Scams Sasquatch and the Supernatural. It's a video series you can watch on YouTube. Had a lot of this too. Human audio perception is not a tape recorder. Eyes can be even worse. And he uses the example of somebody coming into the lecture hall and stealing a purse, and then they're trying to ask, questions about him, and everybody got everything wrong. Or, it's really the one that you can, I'll pull up one that really shows. So you guys on TikTok, you can go watch this yourself. I'm going to pull up the selective attention
how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball.
Okay, so this is the selective attention test, okay?
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many.
Okay, so he says, count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. So watch this video.
White pass the
so there's a bunch of guys throwing basketball at each other. You're supposed to count how many times the guys in white pass. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm seeing the guys in white. It's like 7, I think. 8. All right, so they're all passing basketballs around. And
how many passes?
So he says, how many passes did you count? And you can tell him whatever, 10, 11, whatever you saw. But more importantly,
the correct answer
is 15 passes.
But did you see
the gorilla? So most people don't even notice. There's a guy in a gorilla suit that walks right through while they're doing passes. And it's in the middle of the screen. He even waves at the camera as far as I can tell.
Gorilla.
And usually people don't even see it. So let's see. They're going to rewind it and show it. So the gorilla comes walking in slowly, stands right in the middle, beats his chest, and then walks out of the thing. And
this video
most people don't see it.
By Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris, and is copyrighted.
And that's where you go. So when you want to talk about how perfect your hearing is from one time to another, full of crap. All right. So let me go on here. So Regal 1956 says, better gear gives better sound. So I say, again, nobody is arguing that. The argument people are saying is that gear with certain names or a certain price are better than gear with a different name or price. Every time they are challenged to back that up, they run away. Better gear, depending on how you define better, can be measured and shown to be superior. These are the measurements that the true believers refuse to show. Some of us have actually done these measurements and found that the claimed betters are not better when it comes to sound quality. Some are actually drastically worse, if better means more fidelity anyway. And one example of that was the URI or Universal Audio Active Direct box, which really messed up the sound compared to the cheapies. So again, deleted says, perhaps the people here cannot hear a difference between this setup and their Behringer X32. Who knows, but to each his own. Again, so rather than providing any evidence, it's just an ad hominem attack, right? So he says, you claim you can. Would you like to bet $500 on a properly double-blinded ABX test to prove that claim? Again, I'm throwing out the challenge. Look, I'll put up $500 and let's see if you can actually hear it. And so Veronica says, if you had any self-worth, you would have named any one of your uber talented friends from the other side of town. So again, this is what happens in forums. My friend's a famous record producer. And so I always say, yeah, my girlfriend lives in Canada. You wouldn't know her. And they never bring it back up. There was one on the Dolby thread. Somebody's doing that same crap. Okay. We are cooking along. Okay. So I say, oops. Funny how everyone who claims to be able to hear superior versus inferior always chickened out when challenged to prove it, yet the other side doesn't. Sounds like dowsers or wine tasters. Yes, very much so. I'm sorry, this one is so long, but man, this thread just keeps giving. And this is over quite a while. Okay. So Go said, learning to trust your ears above all is the secret to long-term success in this industry. Nulls haven't made me a wealthy man, my ears have. And so I say, anyone who knows even a kindergarten level about audio and hearing knows that ears 1,000,000,000% cannot be trusted. See something even as simple as the McGurk effect. So Ghost says, you might be in the wrong business, my friend, but you're not alone. I'm not. If you're going to lie about human perception, again, just because you're a good producer or whatever, how many good producers believe in magical speaker cables? Rick Rubin. So just meaning that you're a good producer, that you make albums that sell, has nothing to do with your scientific knowledge. Look at Paul Reed Smith. He sells guitars all day long, and he hasn't a clue about the practical electrical audio at all. Like, he thinks wood affects magnets. So when he says you might be in the wrong business, I say, if you don't even have a basic understanding of human hearing, then I suggest you might be in the wrong business. You're going to go throw insults. I'll take you on. So he's saying, you're suggesting I go take a course that teaches me how untrustworthy my ears are after having earned millions of dollars using my ears over the past 25 years? No, nobody said that. So I say, I'm suggesting that if you think your ears are even remotely reliable devices for determining the fidelity of devices, you have no say in any claims about the audio fidelity of devices. There you go. Actually, I'm not suggesting it. I'm stating it plainly. If you think your ears are reliable fidelity detectors, you are wrong. Wine tasters make a living from judging wine, but cannot even tell the difference between white and red wine. So sure, you can make a lot of money being wrong about scientific claims. So this is your typical apologist. They just run. They're going to throw out everything they can to get out of it, but they're full of crap. So he says, I wouldn't say they're reliable fidelity detectors, but I blind test often, and I think if you're here in my room, I would shock you. So he's claiming that he can hear the difference between all these converters. So I'm like, well, how different do the converters have to be specs-wise before you can hear the difference? Are these like older converters? Or can you reliably distinguish between modern converters too? And so he puts out a list of all these things that he's claimed to test, but he really doesn't get this right. And actually, well, we'll get to this later. So, I'm trying to play along, but see, I think I'd like to get up some real money and really test this claim. Most of these converters are so old as to make this plausible, but still they were so close together. I would seriously have my doubts someone is going to get them right past what chancellors predict. I'd like to test this guy on these things, but again, they're older converters. They might have some problems, whatever. It's crazy that the differences are claimed to be so obvious when they certainly aren't more than a dB different on test. If it's true they can be distinguished, what would account for that? Okay, so here we go. If there's a phenomenon, we got to establish there is one first, but if there's a phenomenon, what would account for it? It can't be frequency response because they're spot on there. Can't be noise. They're spot on there. Can't be distortion. They're the same there. Phase, group Soleil, maybe the anti-aliasing filters. I can see it on some older converters. So let's see. IO Mega Man says, every converter out there has an analog path to the chip. Again, we used to call that the glue, right? The signal must be amplified to some degree. How vendors account for this as majority of the differences. However, even if that's true, I say, and those should be reflected in frequency response, distortion, noise, or phase errors in order to be audibly different. If they sound different, you can measure them to be different. Sorry, you got to provide this evidence. Okay, so now there's this guy on Maui. You know, where my grandma used to say that's where the white people keep their golf courses. And if you follow this thread, go ahead and click on his studio and listen to the output of it when you're taking the claims that he's making here. So he says as Ixrazol or something. He says, for converters, if you have to ask, you cannot afford them. How's that insult? You always hear that. Oh, if you got to ask, you can't afford it. Obviously, you don't know because you don't got no money. Again, I flip my phone around. You can take a look at my room. I've got everything these liars claim to worship. And they don't sound any different. We've tested them. They don't sound different. So I said, okay, well, actually, let me go on. It says, while I track to a Zoom F8 for video workflow, a mastering engineer with a decent reputation will have a really extra special units from Cranesong and Benchmark that are a breed apart. I think it's worth it. I'm okay if you think it's worth it, but you made some claims there. So I said, what is different between those converters and the others? Frequency response, bandwidth, noise, distortion? What audible parameter is different between those and the others? This is a huge claim you're making, something that requires evidence. Again, spoiler alert, no evidence will be forthcoming. So he says, the answer is simple. It is people who do mastering for their day job because they get paid to make the right decisions. What the hell does that have to do with anything? So I said, wow. So instead of providing evidence, you run away like a coward and just send insults. I would bet I've worked in this industry as long as you have or more, and have certainly in far better rooms than anything on your YouTube page. I'll go look. This is not an Augsburger room he's sitting in. This is like a kitchen or something. So I say, provide some evidence for your magic claims or just admit it and say, I don't know. It's just what I believe in the face of all available evidence. Not, hey, I should insult people who are more aware of reality than I am. You know, these guys, they make claims. When you call them on it, they won't provide evidence. They just provide insults or just nonsense. Bunch of Deepak Oprah Chopra nonsense. So he says, that's some serious gaslighting. Oh, I said, you were the one who made a reality-based claim. Then instead of backing it up with reality-based evidence, you went for an insult. He says, it's simpler than that. Do you mix and master your own tracks? Welcome to my trap. I didn't set up this trap, but you made it for yourself. So I said, I mix my own tracks, and send it to another professional mastering engineer for mastering, like professionals do. Not mix and master my own stuff. But this is a fallacious non sequitur and has nothing to do with your claim. Remember your claim that those converters sounded better, they're a breed apart, whatever it was you're saying. And then he says, but I know some people I trust that do mix for a living with gear most people have never heard of. It said fallacious appeal to authority. It says, I've read those reviews, some books, and I think I couldn't make better choices, but I'm willing to let someone else buy top-end converters and rent their time. And it's like, so what the hell does that even mean for anything? I mean, if you're paying someone, would you settle for less? And if you're not paying someone, then end of story. That's not my workflow. So I say, again, non sequitur. You made a claim, actually a scientific claim, that is trivially easy to provide evidence for, yet you go to feelings instead. Why is that? Why? Why is it insults and feelings every single time? Cowards. So he says, more gaslighting. I say, the only gaslighting was from you, and it's true. He says, who said anything about science? I said, you did, unless breed apart has no bearing on the sound, in which case it was just word salad. And I repeated his quote, extra special units from Cranesong and Benchmark that are a breed apart. It's hilarious you consider awesome gear and marketing success in terms of sales and people who make their money from gear from their day job as an appeal to authority. I say it's the very definition of a fallacious appeal to authority, no different than going to a wine tasting expert for claims of differences in grapes or going to Paul Reed Smith for claims about wood. Again, you make a scientific claim, you better back it up. And so he says, let's see. So he says, you have an extremely overactive imagination if you interpret breed apart as meaning science. What the hell was that for? Uh-oh, let me plug in my phone real quick. Sorry, guys. Is that plugged in? I hope that's plugged in. So I say, let's try this real slow and simple. When you said these converters were a breed apart, did you or did you not mean by that they sound different from other converters? Again, let's just be honest about what your claim is. So he says, that has zero to do with science. I said, nice dodge. Let's try this again with your claim. And I'm going to repeat it to him again. When you said these converters were a breed apart, did you or did you not mean by that they sound different from other converters? So let's see if we get an actual answer to that. So he says, hard to say, bro, because the person who mixed it also put NIF Varimu compressors and custom analog EQ on it. It all had an impact. That's the point. And more importantly, ears I don't have. That has nothing to do with anything. Again, when you said these converters were a breed apart, did you or did you not mean that they sound different than other converters? Now you're going to run away and say you didn't say that? Get out of here with that. So deleted says, so you can't trust your ears? All of music and sound must be visual because the ears aren't to be trusted. You have to be doing performance art. Say, straw man. Right? I never made that. That's a stupid claim. All right. So I got so just frustrated by the idiocy in here. I think I just take some pot shots at this point. Oh yeah, some ghost guy saying I'm some anonymous guy on the internet, you know, and it's like, how the hell am I anonymous? You know, I'm not anonymous. You go look up anything. How many things did I post that you can go look up? And then the guy is making claims about Reaper. Reaper is going to be subscription. And so I said, you can take it from the horse's mouth that Reaper will not be going subscription. And so he starts, now here's where we degenerate. You got to run away from your claims about audio. So now you're going to start making claims about digital versus analog and software and how open source is better. And so I say, so he says, a real community-based DAW would be open source and not have to rely on merely on the comments of one person on the internet. I'm not one person on the internet. If you're talking about Reaper, I'm not just some guy on the internet. I'm nuts. Okay, so I say, again, zero idea who and what you're talking about. Anything necessary for the open source side already is. And I'm sorry that we're going to go into a Reaper deep dive here. Reaper itself is not. It's not open source, as we need our developers to spend time developing, not maintaining. For instance, and so I tell you, go to Ask Justin Frankel. He talks about open source. Aside from the core code base of Reaper, the JSFX and other scripting languages developed by Kakos, as well as the APIs available, mean you are free to keep the version that is available right now. Right now. Nobody's going to change this on you. Yesterday, whenever, and go to town regardless of what the future holds. Again, as long as you got a computer, you'll run it. Take the version you got right now. Modify the hell out of it. What's the difference? He says, with an open source license and development in public, what I am paid to do that allows me to buy hardware such as DAWs like Ardor can truly live up to that promise. 1 second.
Where do I throw the trash away? I'm taking it out.
Oh, the way at the end, there's a big thing. Sorry. So he's making claims about Ardor. I remember, we're friends with the guys who make Ardor, right? So I said this, let me read it again. With an open source license and development in public, what I am paid to do that allows me to buy hardware such as DAWs like Ardor can truly live up to that promise. So I said, this seems to have come from the Deepak Chopra random quote generator. Not sure what it's supposed to mean. It says that way no one would have to keep guessing the true intent of what's going on behind closed doors in a proprietary model. So I say nobody is guessing and there are no closed doors. Grab one of the APIs and start cranking away. Nobody is stopping you. Liar. Okay, we are almost done. Man, you guys have, troopers have kept up with this punishment, man. But I just had to get this thread out of the way. I'm sure it's going to keep going, but I'm done with it. So I just said, there's so many nonsense claims going on. So I just said, yeah, even Deepak Chopra is embarrassed at this point. The fear of any true believer to even be honest enough to name a single parameter where these differences may be is really telling. And again, how many times I got to ask, what's the difference? Is it a frequency response, distortion, noise? What? Tell me. But you guys keep running away or you make insults and say, I just can't afford it. Again, I'll flip this phone around. You guys can see all this gear. So I said, I'll ask again. Is it frequency response? Easy to show. Why haven't you? Why? Bandwidth. Easy to show. Why haven't you? Distortion. Easy to show. Why haven't you? Noise, it's easy to show. Why haven't you? Instead, we get total nonsense like easier in the box processing. So, this guy's gone on some of these guys are gone on a war against DAWs or something, but I can't be bothered with that crap. Let's see. Hopefully we are rounding the final corner. Okay, page 26, end page. And, man, I don't know if I even bothered responding after this. Okay, so I said, so we have epic biology fails, ridiculous psychology and physiology fails, an even dumber claim that all people respond to the same music with exactly the same emotions. Oh, yeah. So I didn't read you that part. The guy who claimed to hear the difference between all these converters claimed that, when they mixed the thing with a certain sound, that created a certain emotion because of like the console's distortion or whatever. And everybody responds in the same way, which they definitely don't. How many times have you heard a song where somebody goes, oh, that's so deep. I love that song. And you're like, wow, I hate that song. So yeah, shut up. And so I said, and the most epic Dunning-Kruger of them all, the idea that somehow Jung confirms the epic lack of understanding of hearing. This, was it Carl Jung, the philosopher or whatever, who's completely barfed upon in this day and age, right? So I said, this is all easily shown by a few runs with an oscilloscope. Why all the word salad and obfuscation? Again, 26 pages. If any of your guys' claims had any basis in reality, you could have swept it with an oscilloscope and a signal generator, prove me wrong, make me eat my words, take my $500, whatever. And you guys don't, because you're lying. You're either lying to yourselves or you're lying to us, or both. Gravy Face says, he's responding. He says, I'm here to help out people with real problems when I can. And the rest, like these threads, I'm here for the lulz. Honestly, I get nothing more from hanging out here. Definitely a negative return on investment for the time invested, and that's for sure. I can't remember the last time I learned something or received good advice about anything. Again, that's what happens when you're dealing with religious nuts, right? I think that's the end of this. So Ghost says, Ghost responded to me. Am I going to have to respond? He says, I brought up Jung because I believe there is some universality to human emotion. Well, there's not. Much like the archetypes in our dreams, archetypes. Aboriginals exposed to Mozart for the first time don't interpret his jubilance as death and death as jubilance. I take this much further in my personal music philosophy, but I'm seeing I'm up against some cognitive nihilists who get off on the nothingness of human perception while posting on music production forum. I'm better off saving my breath. Again, make some insults instead of providing any evidence. Back to mastering this kick-ass American rock record mixed entirely in the box. Well, at least he's not completely crazy. So anyway, that is my torture for you guys for the week. And, wow, that was a long one. One of these days I'm going to have more people on with me to discuss this stuff. I hate doing this by myself, but, yeah. All right. I'll see you later, Poo Ninja. See you guys on TikTok. Again, I would love to have a TikTok stream key. I think I need 3,000 followers. How many followers do I even have? Do I even have followers? How do you tell? Is there a way to tell? I don't know. Anyways, I'll see you guys next week or whenever I get back to this.